Hey guys, there are many things to talk about in this video about this build, so check timestamps if you want to jump to a certain part of the video. So to start off, what is this? This is a Deadeye using Fireball, but also focusing on Scorch. And Scorch is like it just lowers enemy resistances. So Deadeye is a bit unusual for spellcasters, but the new Deadeye nodes do have some interesting things even for spellcasters. Like it does now have a Ricochet node, which does allow projectiles to bounce off walls. Also, it does have +2 additional projectiles. And of course, Deadeye does have Tailwind, which does give all action speed, including cast speed, and some interesting defensive layers. Also, just quickly, is it just me, or does Fireball have new visuals now? I think it has new visuals. By the way, the Fireball MTX still looks kind of the same. It still looks like it has bigger AoE with MTX, but it's just the visual. I actually prefer default look without the MTX. It just looks cooler, and also it looks so cool when the projectiles bounce off wall. I think that just looks so cool. So that was the idea, to play with the Deadeye, with the chain, with the Ricochet, getting extra projectiles, and then trying to get enough crit chance, crit multi, and somehow survive. I'm gonna try to answer a couple questions that you may have, like for example, how does it function with the Hydrosphere? How does it explode when it chains? Does it work well with Fury Valve Amulet and stuff like that? Okay, so overall the build is it's hard to explain. It's for the clear speed it's good, but for single target it's not very good. Imagine that every build would have like a base viability. And when you get a good build with high base viability, then you don't need much investment, but the more you invest, the higher the damage just gets, almost exponentially. And you can invest a lot to get a lot more damage. But for this, I would say it has low base viability, so you have to invest to make it just viable for red tier maps. And that's what I did. I actually invested quite a bit. Not that much, you know, I usually make it like a budget builds, but I had to invest and get certain items to make this more viable for red tier maps. And it can clear red tier maps, but bossing is not very pleasant with this. Also, another thing, despite only having 5,300 life, I am surprisingly tanky. Like, I could not believe how tanky I am. That's another thing. Like, if you're gonna be playing a build like this, or just a copy of this build, you may actually feel squishy until you get all the things that I'm gonna talk about later on. And once you get those things, then the build actually feels tanky. You just don't get hit, and when you do get hit, you take like 50% reduced damage, or less damage. So it's making this kind of spellcaster very tanky. Now, normally when you get, the more damage you get, the more kind of fake tankiness you feel like you're getting, because you're just destroying enemies before they can hurt you. With this kind of low damage, it's very obvious that the build has good defensive layers, because I can still defeat some of the endgame bosses deathless with no real damage. I mean, I do have over 1 million DPS, but it has so many conditional things, it's really hard to tell how much damage I'm actually doing on average, I guess. Another thing, in many clips you're gonna see me sometimes casting very slowly and other times casting fast. That's because I could not decide, do I prefer to use Control Destruction or do I prefer to use Spell Echo. Control Destruction makes Valve Fireball better. I just tried Control Destruction, tried Spell Echo multiple times, and I still cannot decide which one I prefer. I think I prefer Spell Echo, and I would recommend to play with Spell Echo, because with Control Destruction it just feels too slow and sluggish. Although the damage per projectile may be higher with Control Destruction. And it also makes Valve Fireball stronger. Initially I did not want to use Valve Fireball, I was planning on using Val Righteous Fire, but my damage is not high enough for me to be able to burst down enemies during that Val Righteous Fire. So after that, Val Righteous Fire becomes kind of pointless. But with Valve Fireball, you can recharge it very fast, even against single target when there are no other enemies to kill. And the Valve Fireball can bounce off wall, and each projectile can hit the boss. Obviously that's not gonna happen unless the boss is very close to a wall. Well, that's another thing. Fireball is a projectile that hits the target. If it has no chain, it hits the target and explodes. And the damage is done with the projectile and not the explosion. The explosion can also overlap if it hits wall. Like, let's say a boss is next to a wall, you shoot like 5 projectiles. One projectile hits the target, and another 4 projectiles hits the wall behind the target, and all do the AoE explosion and all overlap on a boss. Then the boss just gets destroyed, absolutely obliterated. Now the thing with chain, it does not explode each time it chains. It does not explode. It does not explode when it chains, does not explode when it forks, does not explode when it splits or pierces. So chain actually may be even bad in some cases. Okay, let's say Hydrosphere. Hydrosphere is like a new thing that people try to abuse in many ways possible. You can actually hit Hydrosphere, and if you got chain, it will then target to the boss. Actually, that's kind of neat ability to use. You drop Hydrosphere, and you don't need to aim, you just shoot into the Hydrosphere, and it just will redirect one projectile towards the boss. Because you can only hit with one projectile with one cast, even with Spell Echo. Well, Spell Echo you cast twice, kind of. Then you can hit twice. But normally you can only hit with one projectile from the same cast on the same target. So even if projectiles would chain of something else from the same cast, it would not hit again the same target. Like imagine you shooting two projectiles, one projectile hits the boss, another projectile hits the Hydrosphere, and the one from Hydrosphere would chain towards the boss, but it would not hit. It would just fly through the boss because it cannot hit again. However, with Valve Fireball, it can. In some cases, and I'm not sure how or why. You know how Valve Fireball just shoots projectiles in sequence around you clockwise, right? You can actually sometimes manage to hit many of those projectiles to the Hydrosphere, and then the Hydrosphere will just unleash a barrage of projectiles towards the boss, and it looks so cool. And that's how Valve Fireball can hit multiple times against the same target. The same applies if it chains off wall and flies towards the boss, it can hit multiple times. So that's actually how I defeated Minotaur with Maven's influence, because all the walls were basically helping, even if the boss was next to a wall and the explosions would shotgun and overlap, or it would bounce off wall and hit the boss, but only from Valve Fireball. Or if I miss in general, there's a chance that one projectile will bounce off wall and target the boss and hits it. So that's how I was able to actually defeat Minotaur, but other than that, it's not really good for endgame bosses. However, you're gonna see I have no armor, no like fortify, no other mitigation, but I'm able to somehow face tank Minotaur. Not all the time face tank, but tank his slams, and all of that is because I have a couple defensive layers. First of all, I have dodge. I have 50% chance to dodge attacks and spells. Then I got Wind Dancer, which is 20% less damage taken if you have not been hit recently, which is in the past 4 seconds. So I take 20% less damage for the first hit basically. Then you combine that with blind, it gives you evasion basically, and I don't really have evasion otherwise. And then finally I got Wind Ward from the node behind Tailwind, which does give 3% less damage taken per Gale Force, and you gain Gale Force each time you cast a skill, up to 10. So 30% less damage taken from Gale Force for one hit, and then 20% less damage taken from Wind Dancer. 50% less damage taken for the first hit, and that is actually pretty good. So yeah, you basically, if you get hit, you just try to run around and hope that you dodge and evade. I mean, if you continuously keep casting, you're gonna continuously get 3% less damage taken per Gale Force. So each time you get hit, you lose them, but you can just spam your other abilities. That's actually another trick. On the left click, I was told you can actually use no link spell Slinger, and it will kind of maintain the Gale Force very fast, but that sounds like a cheat to me, and I did not even want to try it. So I'm actually using Immortal Call. It does give some mitigation as well. It can trigger at the wrong time, so it's whatever. The final last like 2 hours of this build, I actually got the trigger weapon finally, but that's kind of the first thing you should be getting is the trigger weapon, because this build needs a lot of buttons, or it can add a lot of skills that you want, like Flame Wall. You're also gonna want Hydrosphere, you're also gonna want Wave of Conviction with Combustion, and also Sniper's Mark, and also Orb of Storm to generate power charges, so a lot of things. That's why trigger weapon is almost a must, I would say. I was playing all this time without trigger weapon, but it did not feel that great. Against bosses, I would always be wasting my time casting all those things rather than shooting more fireballs. So trigger weapon is very important, and in trigger weapon I have Wave of Conviction, Flame Wall, and Sniper's Mark. Each skill inside the trigger weapon have their own cooldown. But you don't trigger them all at the same time. For example, if you've got 3 skills inside it in your wand, then you're gonna have to cast 3 times to trigger those 3 skills, and each gonna have their own cooldown. So by the time you cast the third one, the first one is probably gonna go off cooldown pretty soon, so you can re-trigger it again. This allowed me to use Orb of Storm with power charge generation. Also, Orb of Storm is linked to Combustion to apply even more, to give me even more damage. Now another thing, I'm using Pinpoint, which makes it a bit awkward, and I wanted to use pinpoint because it also gives +2 projectiles, and you get another +2 projectiles from Deadeye. So overall you're shooting 5 projectiles, which feels great. It could be a bit more, but it feels enough for map clear. However, once you get intensity stacks, that's when you're casting spells. By the way, with Spell Echo you only get 1 intensity stack, so that's why it's anti-synergy to use Spell Echo. Also using Inspiration, which is also anti-synergy kind of to use with Spell Echo, because I had to lower my mana cost. So Pinpoint is a bit awkward to use because you're starting at 5 projectiles and end up with 2 projectiles, and that is because I got +1 to intensity stacks near the witch area. So intensity stack give a lot of damage per projectile. You lose projectile each time you gain another maximum intensity stack, but you gain a lot of damage, and it's hard to say no to that much amount of damage. However, then you're shooting 2 projectiles, which feels weird and wrong. You never really want to shoot 2 projectiles. You want to shoot either 1, 3 or 5. You don't want to shoot 2 or 4 or 6. Well, I guess 6 doesn't really matter, you're gonna be hitting everything, but you don't want to be shooting 2. It's just sometimes hard to actually hit the target, especially if they're moving. Those exiles sometimes really like to move a lot. So that's when a Hydrosphere can help a lot. You just shoot into the Hydrosphere and it will auto-target moving enemies, and you don't need to worry too much. Now, also forgot, there's another defensive layer that I got, and that is the new helmet. Viridis Veil. So this helmet, it gives up to +2 to socketed gems, which can be used for aura and enlighten, because you will get +2 to enlighten, which will reduce the mana reserve for those socketed auras, which is what I'm doing. Also, this helmet, damage of enemies hitting you is unlucky while you have a magic ring equipped. You are hexproof if you have magic ring in right slot. Take no extra damage from critical strikes if you have magic ring in left slot. I can remove curses very easily with Flash, so I did not go with the magic right ring slot, and I'm only using magic ring in the left slot, and that gives me unlucky damage. Basically means that enemies, when they hit you, they roll damage number twice and we choose the lower number. So if we hit for like 1000 and then roll a second time and roll 500, they will choose the 500 and you will take the 500 damage. So that smooths out the spikiness, I guess, of the damage that you take. Also, take no extra damage from critical strikes if you have magic ring in the left slot is very amazing. Basically all the map mods with power charges, crit chance and crit damage, it doesn't matter. They can, I mean, we can still apply ailments with those crits, but they will not do extra damage to you. And I think that is what making this build so tanky. Now I'm also using another new thing, Legacy of Fury boots. This is the Scourge boots, or maybe it's not new, maybe it was from the last, I can't remember. So these boots have a drawback of giving negative all elemental resistances, but also drop Scorched Ground while moving, lasting 4 seconds. It also increases the effect of Scorch, I believe up to 50%, but minus 40%. Also 34% chance, in my case 34% chance when you kill a Scorched enemy to burn each surrounding enemy for 4 seconds, dealing 8% of killed enemy's life as fire damage per second. So it's not really an ignite, it's like, or maybe like a Herald of Ash. That will probably be the best comparison, because with Herald of Ash the overkill damage is burned, it's not really an ignite, and it does damage over time. So this is kind of similar to that, and I was hoping that it would work better, but it doesn't seem to. I mean, it doesn't synergize that well with crit. You would want like elemental damage, you would want fire damage to scale this effect more. It is also not really an explosion, so it does not destroy corpses. So basically you hit the target, you apply Scorch, either with the Scorching Ground or with other things. Like this build is actually using Scorch with Fireball, Threshold Jewel, so I got 50% chance to apply Scorch when I hit with Fireball, but I cannot ignite with Fireball. I hit with Fireball, I apply Scorch, if the target dies, it then does 8% of its life to surrounding enemies. So that works like an explosion, but just over time, which is why it does not feel great. I mean, overall it could do more damage because it's 8% of a monster's life per second, and it does over 4 seconds, so it basically does 32% of its life over its duration. However, in practice, you don't want to wait 4 seconds for enemies to like degen. You're just gonna hit them again. Another thing about the Scorch. The Scorch, many people are misunderstanding that the Scorch from this Scorched Ground is 10% elemental resistance reduction to enemies, right? But this is only for the Scorched Ground. You can still apply stronger Scorch with your hits as long as you do enough damage to the boss. In Path of Building, you can tick a box, the enemy is scorched, but it does not calculate the damage, because it needs to know the damage done and the enemy life, and it doesn't calculate that. But however, you can still assume that the enemy is at least going to be standing on the Scorched Ground, and is going to have minus 10% elemental resistance. However, the Scorch effect will increase that minus 10 to, well, in my case it's going to increase to minus 14, because 40% increased effect of Scorch. Now another thing, you can increase the Scorch effect by getting non-damaging ailment effect, which I do not have. I was originally planning on getting that, but now I even think that it's not even worth using these boots. I would probably use something else than these boots. Right, also I think the Scorch is limited to 30%, minus 30% elemental resistance reduction, so that's why I was thinking maybe it's not even worth scaling Scorch that much. You can just get penetration elsewhere, or like add another course. So that's why I think maybe Scorch is not even that great. You could probably use the Wind Scream or Wind Screech boots or whatever that give extra course, and maybe get flammability on hit ring instead, and it probably would work the same, maybe would even feel better for clearing. Right, so that probably covers all the kind of technical aspects. Now I'm gonna talk about my items, passive, supports and links. So actually I got, maybe I'm gonna start with the body armor. I wanted spell crit body armor, and you can get anything you can afford, but this was the cheapest sacrificial garb, and it is item level 100, and it's easy to color it. You also get armor, evasion, yes. So I got that. I got I bought 6 linked, and this is what I crafted. Now the wand, you want +1 to all fire spell skill gems, which is also gonna boost your anger aura and fireball. So you want +1 to fire skill gems, you also want crit chance, you also really want cast speed and some spell damage, and you want open suffix to be able to craft trigger socketed spells when you use a skill, and that skill can actually be anything. I believe I paid 1 exalt for this one. It's kind of difficult to sometimes get a one like that. I had a similar one, but without any spell damage, which I was trying to get augment caster mod from Harvest, but I just could not get it. It's so annoying with the new Harvest system. You want something like that: cast speed, spell damage, crit chance, and +1 to fire skill and open suffix. And you're gonna want to suck at Wave of Conviction, Flame Wall, and Sniper's Mark. The helmet, like I said, you're gonna want to try to roll or to get a helmet with +2 to level of sucketed gems. The all rest doesn't matter, but that's the main thing: +2 to sucketed gems. And inside the helmet I have Herald of Ash, Anger, Clarity, and Enlighten. Enlighten level 3 turns to Enlighten level 5. Shield, you also want, if possible, cast speed, and other than that, +1 to fire skill gems. You can also get spell damage, crit chance for spells, but also mana could be an issue with this build, because it's a Deadeye. You don't really have good access to good mana nodes early on. Leveling is another thing I'm gonna talk a bit later. So if you can get mana regen and mana, then great. This is kind of almost a perfect shield in my opinion, at least what I'm missing. Boots, I'm really not sure if I would recommend using these boots. Like I said, you could go with some other boots and get more life. Maybe just generic boots would be better. The gloves, you want blind on hit. You can actually get quite a bit of damage on gloves. There are conditional buffs like flat fire damage if you have crit recently, or flat fire damage against ignited enemies, but you can't ignite with the fireball because I'm using the Scorch. That's another thing, I'm not even sure if using Scorch in general is worth it. You may completely drop the Rolling Flames jewel and just be able to ignite this, with fireballs, which alone doesn't really matter because you're crit build, but you could use like LA Focus. You could also use Combustion linked to fireballs. and that basically gives you more flexibility. But you really want that blind, and these gloves are shaped influence, but there is another influence, I forgot which one, I think Warlords, which can roll up to 14 or 15% chance to blind on hit. Could be a lot more expensive. And also I had to get strength. Strength was another issue. The amulet, either amulet or ring, you want some fire leech. You don't really need a lot of fire leech because most of the time you're not gonna be taking hits, and once you do, you're just gonna quickly jam life flask, which should be instant. Jam the life flask and you should be good to go. So you don't really need that much leech. Ideally on amulet can be very expensive. So you would want +1 to fire skill gems. It has a bit different wording than on Vance. On Vance you have +1 to all fire spell skill gems, and on amulet you got something like +1 to all skill gems. One word is missing, and it's annoying to search for it. Just make sure you search the right mode. So you want +1 to fire, you want crit multi, life, some res, if possible fire leech, if not then fire leech on the ring. Cheaper option would also be to get fire leech on Watcher's Eye for anger, which I actually had. Yeah, I had this. Fire damage leeches life while affected by anger. It's like fantasy or something, so you wouldn't even need to worry about leech elsewhere. But like I said, leech isn't really that needed. Instead of Watcher's Eye, you may get like, well, damaging Watcher's Eye, like this one. Increase fire damage while affected by anger, or crit multiplier while affected by anger. Fire pen is not gonna be as efficient because if you're using Scorch, because I already got fire pen, I got combustion, I got exposure, I got penetration, so it's not really efficient to get the fire pen Watcher's Eye. So on belt you want strength, life, resistances, whichever you are lacking, and you can benchcraft damage, just generic damage. And you can socket a jewel. Jewels can also be expensive if you're getting like triple damage jewels. They can be very expensive, but I was trying to get more cast speed. As soon as I crit, I get cast speed, so which is pretty much all the time. And then you can also get flat life, crit multi, flat fire damage to spells. Now I saw so many people saying this. Yes, Fireball does have very high damage effectiveness of 240%, but it's not efficient to just stack flat damage. You want to mix it up. You want to get increased damage, you want to get more damage, you want to get crit multi, and then flat damage. This jewel is not as good, for example, as like a crit multi jewel would be. Oh, by the way, rings. My magic ring, you're probably gonna have to craft a magic ring because people don't really sell these kind of junk items. It just I wanted enough resistances, so I took 2 stone ring and I spammed alterations until I hit life and some res, and that's it. This ring is like item level 69 only. Another ring is just a lot of life and cover resistances. Now the gems for Fireball, while Fireball level 21 is actually pretty cheap. You don't need quality. Quality increases projectile speed, which could be helpful, especially if you want to use slower projectiles, but then I'm using Pinpoint, Spell Echo, which I was replacing with Controlled Destruction, but in the end Spell Echo felt kind of smoother. Energy Leech, Inspiration, and Fire Penetration. Now Energy Leech, you're not gonna get full benefits out of it unless you get hit and lose energy shield. Like, you can't use Elemental Focus because you're gonna disable fireballs. You could use Controlled Destruction, but then you're gonna lower your crit chance, and it may be better, but I really don't want to be losing crit chance. You don't lose that much, but still. Now Inspiration is another thing that doesn't synergize very well with Spell Echo, because, like, look at this. With Spell Echo cast, I only gain 1 inspiration charges. But then again, it may also be good because it's very easy to, once you reach maximum inspiration charges, it's very easy to lose those inspiration charges. See, I cast like another 4 times and I lost it, and I have to gain it again, which is very inconsistent in during the fights, because you get full benefits when you are at maximum inspiration charges, right? And Fire Penetration, well, Fire Penetration. Those are the support gems that I was using. Inside the shield I got Hydrosphere. I don't know if it's needed, but didn't really have what else to add. So Hydrosphere, Efficacy, and Infernal Cry. Infernal Cry is like the last thing that I added, and I didn't really use it all that much. It does apply, cover enemies in ash, but not at full power on a single target, I believe. And it's also slow cast, so I don't really like using it. In gloves I have Orb of Storm, increased critical strike chance, power charge on crit, and combustion. And yes, I do have fire damage to spell, so I can ignite with Orb of Storm. And also Orb of Storm, because of the gloves, it also is linked to the blind. So Orb of Storm has very high chance to blind, which gives me another defensive layer. Inside the boost I have Flame Dash, Arcane Surge, increased duration, and Immortal Call. Immortal Call with increased duration will increases the duration, and when I Flame Dash, again Arcane Surge and increased duration does affect its duration, so yeah. And inside one, like I said, Wave of Conviction, Flame Wall, and Sniper's Mark. Sniper's Mark is actually very amazing. You can only apply one Sniper's Mark on enemy. Once you apply Sniper's Mark, when you hit the enemy with the projectile, it will split up to 4 targets with the Sniper's Mark. So it will split, then it will split, pierce, fork, chain. I think that's the sequence, either of those, but in my case it splits, then chains, and then explodes. So split is very nice, and it also cursed enemies take 34% increased damage from projectile hits. I also got, I forgot, that's what I was forgetting. I was actually supposed to be getting Mark of Prey, so marked enemies grant flash charges to you, and also marked enemies take 10% increased damage. That's another 10% more multiplier. Well, not really, but in a sense. Actually, let's talk about the passive 3, I guess. Just quickly, flasks. I'm using Diamond Flask to increase the crit, Quartz Flask to give him more dodge, and then Sulfur is not really needed. I just did not really have a replacement, and you know how lazy I am with flasks. So the passive 3, you can increase the mark effect with this one. 75% increased effect of your mark is massive. Like absolutely massive. Also marked enemies, when we die we do not lose the mark. So nearby enemies to the marked dead enemy will do less damage, but that's a bit hard to place strategically. It wouldn't really give me that much more damage. I would gain like 400k DPS on top, but I would be a lot squishier. The Wind Ward is just making me so much tankier. So while leveling I actually took Tailwind first to make me go faster. Then I took Ricochet to start chaining and helping me with the clear speed and Fireball. Then I believe I took Endless Munitions, and then finally took the Wind Ward, because you don't really need Wind Ward early on, you shouldn't be that squishy. But leveling as a Deadeye was a bit tricky with Fireball, and I did use Fireball to level it up. So I actually had no damage until I reached like Shadows area and started picking up crit chance. Until then it felt kind of squishy. Now another thing that you're gonna see on this passive 3, I got this unique luster jewel, but actually you don't need it, and instead spec into these life nodes and maybe get the cast speed nodes here, and then you would have more damage and more cast speed and more life when taking like something like that. But the main thing why I took this, and I was originally planning on taking large cluster jewel and socketing 2 small ones to get a lot of life, but I don't really need that much more life, turns out. I am pretty tanky. And with this one I'm getting mana and mana regen, which was a big issue actually while leveling. Yeah, actually I don't know why that kind of stopped being an issue. I think I just got a lot more items with like mana and mana regen, and that stopped being an issue. But you may have some mana issues, but you could just take like this mana node. I actually took these mana nodes to help with regen a bit. You can also take that one or that one on kill, but you're only gonna have mana issues on a single target mostly. So you don't need these, and other than that, other than giving life and mana regen, it's not really useful. So yeah, I got a Rolling Flame jewel in here. It gives me 50% chance to scorch on hit with Fireball, but I cannot ignite with Fireball, but I can still ignite with other skills. And yeah, on other jewels I already mentioned, you want life, crit multiplier, flare damage, something like that, cast speed, you take Wind Dancer as well. Yeah, that pretty much covers this build. So I actually did not plan a next build yet. So if you got some build ideas that you would maybe want me to experiment with, let me know in the comments below. And for now, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.